Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Farm, the podcast. I'm your host, Jace Young, and today's topic of discussion is this: are you being led by the ego or by God? Now, guys, inside today's topic and discussion here, it's more of a powerful one, right? So obviously you can tell that probably by the title, but the reason I bring this up is because I'm going through just some of my daily work here, and I try to be intentional about connecting with God on a daily basis so I can continue to look into, why I am the way that I am, the mistakes that I've made in my past, and how I can ultimately foster and build that relationship that gets me closer and closer to Him. Now, the work that I'm currently going through is a book called A Course in Miracles. Some of you have probably heard of it. It's definitely a little bit out of the realm when it comes to traditional religion and stuff like that, but I'm also kind of an out of the realm type of guy as well, which is why it attracted me. But anyways, what the book talks about is it talks about our journey through life and how when we're born, we are completely connected to God. But as we go through and we start to experience life, we start to experience basically another identity within ourselves, which is called the ego. That's how it talks about it in the book. And the ego is the one thing here that wants to basically rob us of everything that we want in life, right? It's going to create stories for you, create fear for you. It's just going to try to hold you back, if you know what I'm talking about, right? The other way to think about the ego is like the devil acting in your life, trying to take everything away that you love and trying to keep you from doing things that you feel God is telling you to do. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So I think back to what I read today, and it talked a lot about, are you really listening to God or are you listening to the ego? And what I mean by that is I think all of us have this ability to hear the voice of God. And again, too, if you're not, don't want to call him God, that's fine. Whatever it is to you, I believe there's higher power up there. So inside today's video and podcast, I'm going to refer to him as God. But there's certain times in my life where you can hear that voice of God, right? It's like this whisper in the back of your mind where he's telling you to do something. So for example, growing up inside the family farm operation and then working with customers inside the legacy farm, there's a lot of people that are in situations with family where they know that what they're currently tolerating in their life is not right? And they know they need to do something different. And the only thing they know they need to do something different, the only reason why that is because they know that they've consistently heard this voice saying, hey, jackass, this isn't right. You shouldn't be doing this. You need to make some different changes here. And guess what? In taking those actions, there's some unknowns, right? There's some fear there around confronting maybe your parents or a sibling or a business partner or whatever that is there. There's a lot of fear. And we see that all the time with people coming to Legacy Farmer, because once you get the numbers structured and organized, man, you got to start taking different actions, and your actions may have negative or positive, basically collateral damage, I guess is what I'll call it, on other people inside of the operation there. And so typically when you hear that voice of God, man, this is when the ego, or the devil, if you want to put it in simple terms there, really rises up the most here and tries to paint this fear in our minds around, well, what will happen? What will happen if I buy this or do that? Or what would happen if I had this critical conversation with my dad about separating out the operation, or whatever that may be, right? All of us are faced with some type of big decisions in life. And I feel like looking back at my journey here, man, when I was in a place and a crossroads of making those big decisions, I could hear the voice of God. He was telling me exactly what to do, but then I was just freaking rained down on with fear and what if scenarios and all these things that could happen. And that's exactly what the ego is bringing to me, right? It wanted to hold me back. It wanted me not to listen to the message of God, because listening to the voice of God or his message involves me getting the results that I want inside of my life. Now, it may not happen right away, but it's the whole point here is, when you hear the voice of God and you're inspired by something he said to you, you are following his journey that he had laid out for you. And the ego doesn't want you to do that at all. The ego wants you to stay safe. It wants you to stay comfortable. It wants you to never change. It wants you to live in constant pain and agony for your entire life. And that is how the ego wins. The ego is all about separating and dividing us as individuals. God is all about bringing us together and really healing us, right? So, the foundational word that you can look for there is God wants to create love inside of, this world that we live in, and his entire sonship, right, is what I'll say there. So my question for you is as you're listening to all this, those of you that are at a crossroads, or you're trying to make a big, powerful decision inside of your life, or you look back at the decisions you have made up to this point in your life, have you been listening to the ego, or have you been listening to the voice of God? And that is the quick answer to figure that out is, do you have the results that you want inside your life or not? And most likely, if the answer is not, it's because you have been distracted by the ego and listening to that voice, which is, you definitely hear it. The ego screams and God whispers to you. That's how I look at it. And so if you're in a point in your life where you just don't have the results that you want, then you've most likely, you've been listening to the voice of the ego. And I was there and I've been there. And guess what? I'll go through that again, because as you level up in business or life and you get different stages, you have kids, you get married, like all these different variables are changing here. There's more risk on the table. More people are going to ultimately impacted by the decisions you make. So the decisions are going to get tougher and tougher. And as they get tougher and tougher, and God is telling you to do something, as these decisions get bigger and bigger and more people are involved, it's like the ego gets stronger and stronger. And it's like the ego is bringing a bigger army there to distract you again and keep you where you're at, in a place of pain and agony and just not satisfied with your life and ultimately the results that you've gotten. So when I look at this, I got to look back at my life and think through, there's been certain decisions where I've listened to the ego, and guess what? Nothing changed in my life. I stayed where I was. I was in pain and agony and just wasn't happy with my life or satisfied in any way at all. But the times in my life that I looked and listened to the voice of God, trusted it, was inspired by it, but then acted upon it, man, immediately after taking action there was some pain that I went through, right? But the thing is, I was looking back at that. One, when you're in the middle of a painful situation, it seems like it's lasting forever, but then all of a sudden you get through it. It's like 5 years flies by and you look back and you're like, one, that wasn't that bad. Two, I see exactly why God put me through that, because every big decision we make or big significant change that we make, I guarantee you from my experience, there's going to be this valley, right? Or this walk through hell essentially that you have to go through, where you have to deal with, again, the collateral damage from making that decision, but knowing that, hey, I listened to the voice of God here. There's going to be a gift for me that I'm heading towards right now. But right now I have to understand that I have to go through this, hell of a journey essentially, and learn these lessons and just really earn those gifts or those blessings that God has for me up there. And so guys, I share all this with you because I think a lot of people need to hear this message, myself included, because I think too often, man, we listen to the ego way more than we listen to God. And we know deep down what God is telling us to do, but man, that ego comes and it's fully armed and loaded and trying to rain down all this fear on top of you around a big decision or something big that you have to make inside of your life there. And it just holds people back. Any gifts that you want to receive in your life, they're not going to be given to you by the ego. They're not going to be given to you by sitting where you're at and not taking the actions God is telling you to take and just hoping and praying that things work out. God did not, yes, he wants us to have hope and prayer, but the thing is though, is he wants us to have that on top of taking action, right? And being inspired by listening to his voice and taking action because of it. And then once we do that, we're walking his journey, right? And on that journey, there's going to be ups and downs, but at the end of the day, isn't that what life's about, right? We want these blessings at the end of the journey here and along the journey as well. But man, that's what makes life meaningful. And I think a lot of people, we avoid that because not only the ego is stepping in, but also too, society has just kind of conditioned us to not take any risks, to not do anything big, to just be happy with where you're at with what you have. I don't operate that way. I just don't. All right. And I never will. I'm always going to want more because I want to expand constantly in every area of my life, which means, hey, I'm going to be taking risks, right? And the easy way for a lot of people to equate this to is the amount of money you have. And I can tell you, the more money you make, the bigger risk you're probably going to take, right? And I'm not saying that for everybody. I think as you get older, you get in your 50s and 60s, your risk tolerance starts to go down. But I'm just telling you from my experience of building out Legacy Farmer, but then also too being in some other networks, that's been the experience of everybody, right? The whole point here is we want to walk this journey with God and trust his voice and be inspired by it and take action because of it. But once you get on that journey though, you become addicted to the journey because the journey becomes a game, right? A game of solving problems, reaching success, having failures, solving problems, reaching success. Like it's just this constant cycle and over again. And I feel like that is what God wants us to do, to learn, to grow, to ultimately work our way back in 100% connection with him. And again, talking about the Course in Miracles in the book and things that I'm working through right now, the ego wants us separate from him, right? And I feel like our journey through life is really a recognition and awareness of how the ego has popped in, distracted us, really just derailed us from the journey that God wants us to go on, and recognizing what the ego is, and then working our way back towards God, which is exactly what I feel like I'm doing inside of my life. So my friends, at the end of the day, I hope this message was powerful for you. I hope you took away some things from it, but most importantly, I hope you take action because of it. So my friends, that concludes today's episode. We will catch you on the next one.